Hello everyone, welcome to Modal Fantasy. I am your host Zack, and yeah, we're doing capes again. Capes are really cool. I just walked by my grandfather before hitting record. He just gave me this look of just disappointment. But that's okay because I experienced such a fun fantasy book that is what makes the adventure even more fun, because sometimes you just gotta get dressed up to go on a wild magical adventure. Today we're going to be talking all about The Assassin's Apprentice. This is written by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Farseer Trilogy. And the first time that I read this book was right after reading the Kingkiller Chronicles, and I have to say, right off the bat, the first time that I read this book, I hated it. Wait, why am I doing a review if I hated it? Well, everyone, when it comes to time, sometimes your perception of things do change, as well as what you like and hate, and I gave this book another try, and I have to say, I really enjoyed it, and if I could go back in time and punch myself in the face, I would. Why don't we do it? Yeah, take that, Zack. Ow, my face. Oh, okay, so why don't we get into the review? Ah, God, nice. So what is the basic summary of The Assassin's Apprentice? Well, we follow a young assassin named Fitz, who is retelling his life story. He's retelling the whole story of his land, but he keeps being drawn to the beginning of his own life and kind of what shaped him to be the person that he is in the future. We don't really know much about his adult self, but we know a lot about himself as a kid. And he is the base-born son of a prince, and pretty much because of this, it leads the whole kingdom and the whole court system into pretty much turmoil because they don't know about the whole inheritance and what's going to happen. And because of this, Fitz is playing a very dangerous game where him just being born and being alive puts everything at jeopardy. He could be a tool for the destruction of the kingdom, or he can just be pretty much a device for political maneuvering. Well, he's pretty much trained to become an assassin, to do pretty much both. It's pretty much up to Fitz in his own little hands to discover the secrets, as well as is he going to destroy the kingdom or find glory, and that's kind of the base of the story. Now, I really did enjoy this book. I think pretty much what I enjoyed about it is the characters and the world. The magic system for me isn't what was really there for me, but what I loved about this whole experience was just him telling a story, but at the exact same time, kind of, when it comes to all these characters, I would use pretty much, they're all morally gray in one way, shape, or form. There aren't really any good characters. I mean, there are bad characters, but even they have their own reasons of why they are awful and evil. Now, when it comes to the story, it's weird because it's told in pretty much the past tense, but at the exact same time, it is told through, again, Fitz, so he's kind of being the only person there that actually is kind of stable. It isn't like, little did you know, 40 years down the line, this would happen. No, he's pretty much, the story's told when it's happening. And I really like that. I think that's why people were kind of like, you should read this after reading the Kingkiller Chronicles, because it's a story within a story. And if you can distance yourself from that, this helps with the narrative, especially when it comes to this book, because that's not really the point of it. And a lot of the stuff that I loved about it was kind of the environment, as well as when it comes to the prose, they're okay. What I liked about it is the dialogue. The dialogue in this is so great and so snappy and really gets to your heartstrings at times, because what Robin Hobb does really well is just show how human people can be, especially when the main theme of this is pretty much, you know, you've done nothing wrong. The only sin that you've committed is being born pretty much not in a political means, or you're pretty much, you know, born, it's the Jon Snow argument of you're just born to be a horrible person because your father couldn't keep it in their pants, that type of situation. But Fitz is a character that perseveres and pretty much rises to the occasion. Yes, he becomes an assassin, but he learns more about saving lives than it is about taking lives. Now, when it comes to the cons of the book, it's kind of weird because I think the biggest con is if you're not really into the old traditional fantasy of medieval European fantasy, this book might seem a little weird and tacky because a lot of this leans into what you expect from like the 90s and the 80s, even into like the 70s of European fantasy, with you have keeps, knights, fair maidens, but at the same time that isn't really one of the big factors of this book, and actually becomes a pro. We'll get into that, why I think it's a pro, but if you're not used to that, you might think this book is super duper cheesy. Now, there is one other thing that I'll say, because as me, I'm a dog person, and dogs do play a huge role in this book as well as animals, and that is, If you don't like that animals get harmed in one way, shape, or form, you might not like this book all that much. I just have to give that warning because for me, I was getting a little sad at some parts, and maybe I wasn't in the best mood. I was like looking at my dog, and she looked at me and like looked me on the face, and I was like, no, please, I'm just reading the most saddest parts ever in this book. But other than that, the book is really interesting in the way that it approaches the prose, because I think having it in that classical fantasy setting where you have characters that are literally named Chivalry, Patience, Regal, Shrewd. Fitz is the most interesting out of all of them because if you actually translate his name, it's just of son or son of. So he doesn't even really have a name, he's just son of, meaning that he's just like no one in a sense. And that's kind of what leads to the interesting things about this book is actually the naming conventions and how Robin Hobb doesn't leave anything out, especially when it comes to characters' names. Sometimes you would think, oh, because they have this very noble name, they're going to be a very noble character or person. And in the case of this story, no, I think it's actually a detriment to their character. And I love that they explore this, especially when it comes to actually poking fun at traditional medieval European fantasy stories at this time, because it might seem like that. But what I love about it is it pokes fun at it because it takes those trappings and these tropes and actually flips them on their head, especially what was going on in the 90s where everything was still very proper medieval European fantasy, but here it pretty much is showing the seeds of what would happen later on, what we get to now with it not just being medieval fantasy set in Europe. This is kind of where it starts, and I can actually see it physically in this book. And this is also a really good jumping on point. If you aren't really into A Song of Ice and Fire, this is a good middle ground. I like this book because it isn't super gruesome, but the emotional weight of it is still there and still at the heart of this narrative, which for me, I absolutely adore. Now, some of my favorite parts of this book is actually the relationship that Fitz has with various characters, such as Burrich, who is kind of his father in a way. He was the stable bastard to his father, and was pretty much tasked with, now this is your problem, this is who you're gonna have to follow. It's pretty much like an Alfred and Bruce Wayne situation with their relationship. Sometimes it's rocky, sometimes they love each other, but in the end of the day, they still rely on each other, and I love that. Though my favorite character in all of the story is actually Patience. She is fun because she just has a new perspective on life that I love, especially her relationship that she has with Fitz. It's not your traditional relationship in the way of, oh, I'm a person that's kind of kooky and wacky. No, there's actually a lot of heart to it, and by the end of the narrative of this book, you really fall in love with her, as well as kind of, you understand she's not a bad person, she just has a different outlook on life, which for me, I absolutely love. The one thing I have to say that I really enjoyed about this book a second time through is actually the world building. The first time that I read it, I was, there's not really much world building, but when you get into the chapters where each epigraph is pretty much Fitz going through and telling the history of the 6 duchies, it's fantastic because he'll talk about a character and their relationship, as well as maybe a piece of land, maybe a people, maybe a culture. And by the end of the story, I felt like I knew the exact whole world of the duchies. I mean, yes, there's some things that are going to be in the other books, but I felt like I understand and grasp the situation. It doesn't feel like there's a map because they needed a map because this is a traditional fantasy story. It feels like it's there, it's in an appropriate place. The one thing I think about the most when I think about the story when it comes to the world building and the setting is how rustic it feels. I feel like every 2 seconds I need to be near a fire, I need to have chicken roasting, or I need to have hot butter, that type of stuff. And it's kind of, again, that's why I was getting a lot of feeling of A Song of Ice and Fire. But again, I can't really compare the two because they're so different, but yet when it comes to the world building and the setting, it feels just as vast, and she does a lot of amazing things in the amount of pages that she has, even though this is a short book. In the end, I absolutely love this book, and I recommend this to everyone. Personally, this is a book that you can read pretty much anywhere, any season. For me, I like reading books during certain seasons, but this time, for me, you can read this because it spans years. It's perfect for a night read, it's perfect during the beach, it's perfect for any time you're just bored or the power goes out. This is the type of book that you could snuggle up with and just get lost in the world, get lost in the character of Fitz, and just really enjoy every little minute detail. And personally, I'm going to keep reading through the series, and we're going to be covering it very, very soon, and I'm so excited. If you have a chance to read this book, what did you think about it? Who are some of your favorite characters? Are there some moments that you absolutely love? Leave the comment down below, and I'd love to keep furthering this discussion with you. Well, everyone, thank you so much for watching this video, and like always, may your food and drink ever be tasteful, and may your books be filled with fantasy and adventure. Bye, everyone. See ya!